Hello everyone, and this is the Back 40 Feet, and my name is Mary, and this is a channel in which we talk about suburban, urban, and patio gardening. So I just came back in from the Back 40, and it's still pretty cold out there, and thought that this would be a good time to start talking about hardiness zones. So every place that we live, plants can thrive or not thrive, and it's really going to be based upon the winter temperatures. So with that, there's been a creation of hardiness zones based upon your lowest winter temperature. And these zones can be anywhere from 1, which would be the coldest, to 13, which would be tropical. And all of us and the plants around us live within these zones. So it's really important to know what zone you live in so that you can determine if this is the right plant for you and your space. And in these hardiness zones, so here in the United States, the Department of Agriculture has a very good interactive map, and you can search by zip code, but most countries will also have a hardiness zone. And the zones aren't just about the lowest temperature, but you may find that there's a lot of variation in hardiness zones based upon terrain, altitude, how close you are to the ocean or a large lake. It can also vary based upon the jet stream and currents. So getting an understanding of what your zone is, and then when you're looking up plants, whether it's in your book or your seed catalogs, there's usually a rating based upon that species or that particular plant as to what zone it should be planted in. And sometimes you'll even see a range that it should only be, for example, zones 3 to 9. And that's basically telling you that these plants don't like to be really cold and they don't like to be really hot either. So being able to understand that to make the most use of your garden would be really helpful. And as you're looking at these and trying to figure out what you can plant in your garden, it's also really important to know what your growing season is. And that would be based upon your last frost date and your earliest frost date if you live in a location that has frost. So the Farmer's Almanac has some very good resources, as does the NOAA site, and I'll put those links here on the channel that you can find out when your average last frost date. Because plants that are growing that are annuals do not like to be touched by frost. So that brings us into a brief discussion about annuals versus perennials, because this is also really important based upon your hardiness zones. So an annual plant is a plant that lasts for 1 year. That's its life cycle from seed to finish. So for example, a tomato, you start that by seed, it'll grow, it'll have fruit, the fruit has seeds, the plant dies off, and then you have seeds for the next year. That's an annual. But if you live in a location that has frost or it can get cold, you may see some plants that are listed as an annual in your zone, but are otherwise a perennial in warmer zones. So a perennial plant is a plant that comes back every year or can live the entire year. And sometimes they'll hibernate and they'll die back during the fall, but they always come back in the spring. So by looking at your hardiness zones, you will know if something is a perennial or an annual in your area. For example, here in Massachusetts, plants such as canna lilies, dahlias, or gladiolus are not hardy over the winter and they will die. So then you look in more temperate climates further south, these bulbs come back every year, just like the daffodils do here in New England. And which is fine, like that just means that we either have to buy these bulbs every year, or you could be really ambitious in the fall and dig them up. But you just have to know, is my plant going to live the next year or not, and whether you want to spend the money growing those plants. So that's basically the summary of hardiness zones. So go and investigate which zone you're in and start looking at those catalogs.